Are you listening to this at night? Maybe you're sitting in your living room, the world outside your window swallowed by darkness and mist. Or maybe you're driving a lonely mountain road, headlights barely cutting through the fog. Either way, you should know some stories aren't just meant to scare you. Some are warnings, and in the Appalachians, we take our warnings seriously. My name is Sheriff Tom Grady, and I've spent the better part of 20 years patrolling these mountains. I know every hollow, every winding road, every family that's called this place home for generations. I thought I'd seen it all: moonshiners, lost hikers, the kind of trouble that comes with small towns and long winters. But nothing prepares you for the fog. Not the kind that just rolls in off the hills, but the kind that creeps, thick and silent, swallowing sound and light until you can't see your own hand in front of your face. That's when the whispers start. At first, you think it's just the wind, or maybe a trick of your own tired mind. But then you realize the voices are calling your name, or worse, the names of people you love. They promise things, beg for help, or sometimes just laugh. A sound that chills you deeper than the cold ever could. If you ever hear the whispers in the fog, don't answer. That's the first rule every sheriff in these parts learns, and the one most folks only break once. Because the whispers aren't just noise, they're an invitation. And whatever's out there, waiting in the mist, is hoping you'll listen. I've seen what happens when people do. I've seen what's left behind. So if you're hearing this now, remember, some stories are told to keep you alive, and some rules are written in the dark. The Appalachians are a world apart, a place where the land rises and falls in endless waves of green and gray, where the morning mist clings to the hollows and the ridgelines vanish into clouds. Here, the forests are thick with ancient oaks and maples, their roots tangled in the red clay, their branches woven so tight that sunlight only filters through in broken, golden shards. The air always smells of damp earth, wood smoke, and wildflowers, and the silence is never complete. There's always the distant call of a whippoorwill, the rustle of leaves, or the low, steady hum of the river winding through the valley. I was born in a small town tucked between two mountains, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your business, where the church bell rings on Sundays and the diner serves the same pie it has for 50 years. My family's been here longer than the roads. Grady is a name you'll find on old headstones and faded deeds, and my father wore the badge before me, just like his father did before him. I grew up hearing stories about the land, about the things that lived in the woods and the rules you followed if you wanted to see another sunrise. My grandmother used to say the fog was alive, that it could slip through cracks and under doors, that it carried secrets from one hollow to the next. She'd sit on the porch in the evenings, her eyes fixed on the tree line, and tell me about the old days, about neighbors who vanished without a trace, about voices that called from the mist, about the time she saw a figure standing in the fog, tall and thin, watching the house until dawn. The mountains remember, she'd say, her voice low and certain, and the fog never forgets. I never planned to be sheriff. I left for a while, trying to make a life in the city, but the noise and the crowds pressed in on me, making me long for the quiet and the space of home. When my father passed, I came back, thinking I'd stay just long enough to help my mother settle things. But the land has a way of holding on to you, and before I knew it, I was wearing the badge, driving the same roads my father did, answering the same calls, and learning the same lessons he tried to tech me. Now, every morning, I watch the fog roll in from the porch, coffee in hand, and I remember those stories. I know the land, the people, and the dangers that come with both. I've seen the way the mist can swallow a road, how it can turn a familiar path into a maze. And I've learned that in the Appalachians, the line between legend and truth is as thin as the veil of fog that covers the hills at dawn. Every sheriff and deputy in these mountains gets handed a list of rules on their first day. It's not something you'll find in any official handbook, but it's passed down from one badge to the next, scribbled on the back of an old map or tucked into a desk drawer. Some of the rules sound like superstition, the kind of thing you'd expect from old-timers who've spent too many nights alone in the woods. But after a while, you realize they're more than just stories, they're survival. Rule 1. Never patrol alone when the fog is thick enough to hide your boots. If you can't see the end of your flashlight beam, turn back. Rule 2. If you hear your name called from the mist, don't answer. No matter how familiar the voice sounds, keep moving and don't look back. Rule 3. Always carry a silver coin in your pocket. My father said it was for luck, but the old folks say silver keeps the bad things at bay. Rule 4. If you see lights moving through the trees where there shouldn't be any, mark the spot and come back in daylight. Rule 5. Never whistle in the fog. It's said to draw the attention of things that listen. Rule 6. If you find footprints that start as boots and end as bare feet, leave the area immediately and don't return until the fog lifts. Rule 7. If you get lost, sit down and wait for sunrise. The mountains shift after dark, and the fog can lead you places you're not meant to go. Some deputies laugh when they first read the list, thinking it's just a way to haze the new guy. But the laughter fades after the first time they hear the whispers, soft, insistent, threading through the mist like a song you can't quite remember. I've seen what happens when the rules are broken. There was a deputy years back who answered a voice in the fog and was found days later, wandering and silent, unable to speak of what he'd seen. Another time, a hunter followed strange lights and never came home. The rules aren't just tradition, they're a warning. And every time I slip that silver coin into my pocket, I remember that the mountains have their own laws, and they don't forgive carelessness. Most days, my job is as ordinary as it gets. I drive the back roads, check on old folks who live alone, break up the occasional argument at the gas station, and make sure the high school kids aren't getting into too much trouble down by the river. There's a rhythm to it, a comfort in the routine. The radio crackles with familiar voices, the same small-town problems repeating like the seasons. But every so often, something shifts, and the mountains remind you that you're not really in charge out here. It started with a call from the Jenkins farm just after sunrise. Old man Jenkins was waiting on his porch, hat in hand, eyes fixed on the pasture. "Lost 2 goats last night," he said, voice tight. "No blood, no tracks, just gone." I walked the fence line, boots sinking into the dew-soaked grass, and found nothing but a patch of flattened earth and a strange, twisting pattern in the mud, like something had dragged itself in circles before vanishing. I told Jenkins it was probably coyotes, but he just shook his head. "Coyotes don't leave the gate closed behind them, Sheriff." Later that afternoon, I stopped by Miller Place to check on a report of trespassers. Mrs. Miller met me at the door, her face pale. "I heard voices last night," she whispered, "out in the fog. Sounded like my brother, but he's been dead for 10 years. I walked the property, found nothing but the lingering scent of wood smoke and the heavy hush that settles when the fog rolls in. Still, I made a note in my logbook just in case. That evening, the fog came down hard, thick as wool, swallowing the town in silence. I was driving the ridge road, headlights barely piercing the gray, when I saw them, footprints, clear as day, crossing the blacktop. They started as boot prints, deep and steady, but halfway across the road they changed. The toes spread, the heel vanished, and by the time they reached the ditch, they were bare feet, long and narrow, pressed deep into the mud. I stopped the cruiser, engine idling, and stepped out, the cold biting through my uniform. The air was so still I could hear my own heartbeat. That's when I heard it, a whisper, soft and close, curling through the fog like a secret. First, I thought it was the wind, but then it came again, clearer this time. Tom, my name, spoken in a voice I hadn't heard in years. I spun around, flashlight sweeping the trees, but there was nothing there, just the fog, thick and endless, pressing in on all sides. I got back in the car, locked the doors, and drove straight to the station, hands tight on the wheel. The radio was silent, the world outside reduced to a tunnel of gray. I told myself it was just exhaustion, just the tricks the fog plays on a tired mind. But deep down, I knew better. The rules were clear: don't answer the voices, don't follow the footprints, don't linger in the fog. That night, as I sat at my desk, the silver coin cold in my palm, I realized the mountains were waking up, and whatever was out there was just getting started. When the mountains start acting strange, I go see Miss Ada. She's lived up on Crow's Nest Ridge longer than anyone can remember. A woman with eyes sharp as flint and a memory that stretches back before the highway was paved. Her cabin is a patchwork of old wood and tin, wind chimes made from spoons and bones clinking on the porch. Folks say she knows things about herbs, about weather, about the kind of trouble that doesn't show up in police reports. I brought her a sack of flour and a jar of honey, the way my mother taught me. She poured us both strong coffee and listened as I told her about the missing goats, the footprints, the voices in the fog. She didn't interrupt, just nodded, her fingers tracing circles on the table. "It's the whisperers," she said finally, her voice low. "Old spirits older than these hills. They come with the fog, when the world gets thin and the old rules don't hold so tight. They call to folks, use the voices of loved ones, or sometimes just sing. If you answer, if you follow, you're theirs." She told me about her cousin, years ago, who vanished one night when the fog rolled in thick and heavy. "Heard his mama calling from the woods," she said, her eyes distant. "But she'd been gone for 5 years. He went out anyway. We found his boots by the creek, but never found him." Miss Ada leaned in, her gaze fierce. "The fog's a warning, Sheriff. When it comes, you stay inside, keep the fire burning, and don't listen to anything that calls from the dark. Folks who forget that, well, the mountains remember, and the whisperers never give back what they take." Before I left, she pressed a sprig of mountain mint into my hand. "For protection," she said. "And remember, some things out here are older than law, older than memory. Respect the fog, Sheriff. And never, ever answer the whispers." Her words followed me all the way down the mountain, heavy as the mist curling through the trees. It was just after midnight when the call came in. Deputy Carter's voice crackled through the radio, tense and thin. "Sheriff, I'm out by Old Mill Road. Though I saw someone in the fog, I looked like a kid, maybe lost. I'm gonna check it out." I told him to wait, to stay in the cruiser and keep the doors locked until I got there. But the line went dead before I could finish. Static filled the air, and a cold knot formed in my stomach. Carter was new, eager to prove himself, and not from around here. He'd heard the rules, laughed at some, nodded at others, but I could tell he didn't really believe it. Not yet. I grabbed my coat, the silver coin, and the sprig of mountain mint Miss Ada had given me, and headed out into the night. The fog was thicker than I'd ever seen, swallowing the headlights, turning the world into a shifting maze of gray. I found Carter's cruiser parked on the shoulder, engine running, driver's door wide open. The radio hissed with static, and his flashlight lay in the mud, beam flickering weakly. I called his name, but the only answer was the soft, insistent whispering that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My own name drifted through the mist, spoken in my father's voice, then my mother's, then Carter's. Each time, I gripped the silver coin tighter, forcing myself to remember the rules. I followed the footprints, boots at first, then bare feet, just like before, leading me deeper into the woods. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me, promising safety, forgiveness, secrets I'd long buried. I tried to block them out, but they pressed in, relentless, until I could barely hear my own thoughts. Then I saw the lights, pale blue, flickering between the trees, moving in patterns that made no sense. They danced just out of reach, drawing me off the path, deeper into the heart of the fog. For a moment, I almost followed, the urge so strong it felt like a hand on my shoulder. But Miss Ada's words echoed in my mind, and I forced myself to stop, to breathe, to remember who I was and why I was there. I called for Carter again, my voice hoarse. Somewhere ahead, I heard a cry, sharp, desperate, then cut off. I ran, branches clawing at my face, the ground slick beneath my boots. I stumbled into a clearing, heart pounding, and found nothing but a circle of trampled grass and Carter's badge lying in the mud. The whispers surged, a chorus of voices rising and falling, laughing and weeping, until I thought I'd go mad. I dropped to my knees, clutching the mountain mint, and whispered a prayer I barely remembered from childhood. The fog pressed close, cold and damp, and for a moment, I saw shapes moving at the edge of the clearing, tall, thin figures with hollow eyes and mouths that never stopped moving. They watched me, heads cocked, as if waiting for me to speak, to answer, to break the last rule. I didn't. I stayed silent, eyes closed, until the whispers faded and the fog began to lift. When I opened my eyes, the clearing was empty. Carter was gone. Only his badge and a single bare footprint remained. I stumbled back to the cruiser, shaken to my core. The radio was still nothing but static. I drove back to town in silence, the whispers echoing in my mind, louder and more insistent than ever. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the fog curl through the hollows, and realized that my skepticism had been nothing but a shield. The rules were real, the danger was real, and the mountains were awake. And now the whispers weren't just calling, they were coming closer. The next day, the fog never lifted. It clung to the hollows and the ridges, thick as wool, turning the world into a gray labyrinth. The whole town felt uneasy. Doors stayed locked, children kept inside, and even the dogs refused to stray far from the porch. I spent the morning searching for Carter, organizing volunteers, but deep down I knew he was gone in a way that search parties couldn't fix. Still, I couldn't give up. Not on him, not on anyone. By dusk, the fog had grown so dense it swallowed the streetlights whole. I sat in my office, Carter's badge on the desk, the silver coin and mountain mint in my pocket, and tried to steady my nerves. The whispers had been growing louder all day, threading through the static on the radio, curling under the door, echoing in the back of my mind. They called my name, promised answers, forgiveness, even peace. But I knew better now. I knew what they wanted. As night fell, a knock came at the door. Miss Ada stood there, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes fierce. "You know what you have to do, Sheriff," she said. "The fog's not leaving until it gets what it came for. You have to face it, but remember the rules, and remember who you are." I nodded, heart pounding, and stepped out into the night. The world was silent except for the soft, insistent whispers that seemed to come from every direction. I walked the old ridge road, flashlight in hand, the silver coin pressed tight in my palm. The fog closed around me, thick and cold, muffling every sound but the voices. At first, the shapes in the mist were just shadows, branches, rocks, the suggestion of movement at the edge of my vision. But as I walked deeper, they grew clearer. Tall, thin figures, their bodies shifting and flickering like candle flames, their faces hidden behind veils of mist. Their mouths moved constantly, spilling out a river of words, some in voices I recognized, others in languages I'd never heard. They circled me, never quite touching, always just out of reach. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Tom," they called, "come with us. It's safe here. You're tired, aren't you? Let us help." I felt the pull, the urge to answer, to step off the road and into their arms. My father's voice, my mother's, Carter's, all mingled together, promising comfort, forgiveness, rest. I stopped, closed my eyes, and remembered Miss Ada's words. I pulled out the mountain mint, crushed it between my fingers, and breathed in the sharp, clean scent. I pressed the silver coin to my lips and whispered the old prayer my grandmother taught me, the one for lost souls and safe returns. The words felt strange in my mouth, but I spoke them anyway, forcing my voice to be steady. The whispers recoiled, their shapes flickering, their voices rising in a wail that made my skin crawl. The fog thickened, pressing in until I could barely breathe. I stumbled forward, following the faint outline of the road, refusing to listen, refusing to answer. The ground grew soft beneath my feet, the world spinning, the whispers clawing at my mind. Then, through the haze, I saw a figure, Carter, standing at the edge of the trees, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. He called my name, his voice thin and desperate. For a moment, I almost answered, almost ran to him. But something in his eyes wasn't right, too empty, too lost. I remembered the rule. Don't answer, don't follow. Instead, I knelt, pressed the mountain mint into the earth, and spoke the prayer again, louder this time. For the lost, for the living, for the ones who remember. The whispers shrieked, their forms unraveling, the fog swirling in angry eddies. Carter's figure flickered, then faded, replaced by a dozen others, faces I half recognized, all pleading, all reaching. I kept my eyes down, kept chanting, and kept the silver coin tight in my fist. The world spun. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, and then, suddenly, silence. The fog thinned, the shapes vanished, and I was alone on the road, the night cold and clear around me. I stood, shaking, and looked back. The path behind me was empty, but Carter's badge lay at my feet, gleaming in the moonlight. I picked it up, heart heavy, and made my way back to town. The fog was lifting, the whispers fading, but I knew they weren't gone for good. The mountains had claimed what they wanted for now, but the rules remained. And so did I, a little older, a little wiser, and forever changed by what I'd faced in the heart of the mist. The morning after the fog lifted, the town felt like it was holding its breath. Sunlight filtered through the trees, painting the streets gold, but the usual sounds, kids laughing, dogs barking, neighbors chatting over fences, were muted, as if everyone was waiting for something to break the spell. I drove the ridge road at dawn, windows down, breathing in the sharp, clean air, half expecting to see Carter step out from the trees, waving and grinning like it was all a bad dream. But the woods were empty, and the only thing I found was a patch of trampled grass and Carter's badge, cold and heavy in my hand. We held a search party, of course. Folks from every corner of the county showed up, boots muddy, eyes red from lack of sleep. We combed the hollows, checked every creek and cave, called Carter's name until our voices were hoarse. But there was nothing, no footprints, no sign of struggle, just the memory of whispers and the uneasy feeling that the mountains had closed around him. His family put up flyers, held out hope, but after a week, even the most stubborn among us had to admit the truth. Carter was gone, taken by something none of us could name. The loss hit hard. Carter was new, but he'd made friends fast, always quick with a joke, always the first to volunteer for the late shift. His absence left a hole in the department, a silence that settled over the station like dust. I saw it in the way the deputies moved, quieter, more careful, glancing over their shoulders when the fog rolled in. The rules, once a source of laughter and eye rolls, became gospel. Silver coins appeared in every pocket, mountain mint hung from rearview mirrors, and no one patrolled alone when the mist was thick. For me, the weight of what happened pressed down with every step. I replayed that night over and over, wondering if I could have done more, if I'd missed some sign, some chance to pull Carter back. The whispers still haunted my dreams, curling around the edges of sleep, promising answers I knew better than to seek. I started carrying the badge with me, a reminder of what the mountains could take, and what they could leave behind. Miss Ada came by the station a few days later, bringing a basket of cornbread and a quiet word. "You did what you could, Sheriff," she said, her hand warm on my arm. "Some folks get lost and some come back changed. The mountains have their own ways, and we're just passing through." Her words helped, a little, but the ache lingered. The community changed, too. People locked their doors earlier, kept their children close, and left offerings at the edge of the woods, bundles of sage, coins, even old photographs. The old stories, once told for fun around campfires, took on a sharper edge. Folks listened more closely, remembered the rules, and watched the fog with wary eyes. Some wounds heal given time and sunlight. Others linger, scars beneath the skin. Reminders of what's been lost and what's still out there. I learned to respect the rules not just as tradition but as a lifeline. The mountains remember, and so do I. And every time the fog creeps down from the ridges, I feel the weight of Carter's badge in my pocket and whisper a promise to the mist. I won't forget. Some nights, when the air is clear and the stars burn sharp above the mountains, I sit on my porch and let my mind wander back to that week when the fog took Carter. I think about the rules, how I used to treat them like old wives' tales, something to humor the elders and pass down to the rookies. Now I know better. The rules are a map, a warning, a thread tying us to the generations who came before, who learned the hard way what happens when you ignore the whispers in the fog. I've replayed every moment, every choice, searching for something I missed. Maybe if I'd gotten there sooner, maybe if I'd warned Carter more forcefully, maybe if I'd trusted my own instincts instead of doubting what I couldn't explain. But the mountains don't deal in maybes. They keep their secrets, and sometimes all you can do is survive and remember. The fog is gone now, burned away by sun and wind, but I know it's not gone for good. The mountains breathe, and the boundary between worlds is thinner than most folks want to believe. I've started noticing things I used to overlook: a sudden hush in the woods, a cold spot on a warm day, the way the wind sometimes carries voices that don't belong to anyone living. Miss Ada says the whisperers are always out there, waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right mistake. There are still questions that keep me up at night. What are the whisperers, really? Are they spirits, memories, something older and hungrier than either? Why do they choose some and not others? And what did Carter see in those last moments, when the fog closed around him and the voices called his name? I don't have answers, just stories, warnings, and the weight of a badge that feels heavier than ever. I keep the silver coin in my pocket, the mountain mint on my dashboard, and Carter's badge close at hand. I remind my deputies, my neighbors, anyone who'll listen. Respect the fog, follow the rules, and never answer a voice that calls from the mist. The mountains remember, and so do I. The Appalachians are full of mysteries, some as old as the rocks themselves. The fog will come again, and when it does, I'll be ready, or as ready as anyone can be. Until then, I keep watch, listen for the whispers, and hope that the stories we tell are enough to keep the darkness at bay. Last night, as I locked up the station and stepped out into the cool mountain air, I paused at the edge of the porch. The sky was clear, the moon hanging low over the ridges, and the world was quiet in that way only the Appalachians can be. So still you can hear your own heartbeat, so deep you almost believe nothing could ever disturb it. But as I stood there, I thought I heard it again. A faint whisper, curling through the trees, just out of reach. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe it was something older, something that never really leaves these hills. If you've listened this far, maybe you're wondering if any of this could happen to you. Maybe you're planning a trip to the mountains, or maybe you already live in a place where the fog rolls in thick and the old stories linger. Let me give you the best advice I have. If you ever find yourself in the Appalachians, especially when the mist is heavy and the world feels smaller than it should, remember the rules. Don't patrol alone in the fog. Don't answer voices that call from the mist, no matter how much they sound like someone you love. Keep a silver coin in your pocket, a sprig of mountain mint on your dashboard, and your wits about you. And if you hear the whispers, soft, insistent, promising things you want to believe, don't answer. That's the rule that matters most. Because the mountains are old, and the things that live in the fog are older still. They know your name, your secrets, your fears. They wait for you to slip, to listen, to follow. I've seen what happens when you do, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever heard something in the fog you couldn't explain? Do you have stories from your own hometown, warnings, rules, or legends passed down through your family? Drop your story in the comments below. Every voice adds to the chorus that keeps us all a little safer, a little wiser, and a little more connected to the land and to each other. If you're new here, or if you want to hear more stories like this, tales of the strange, the unexplained, and the rules that keep us alive, hit that subscribe button. There are more mysteries waiting in the dark, more lessons to be learned from those who came before us, and more whispers in the fog than any of us will ever truly understand. So until next time, stay safe, walk with respect, and keep your ears open. The mountains are always listening, and so am I.